This morning, we're joined by Dr. Martin Rupiya, who's a very well known defense specialist. He has a distinguished career, initially at the Center for Defense Studies at the University of Zimbabwe, then the Institute for Security Studies in Pretoria, and now with the Center for African Renaissance Studies at University of South Africa. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to be talking about national security strategies. And as discussed in the plenary yesterday, uh, the area of national security is, in some African countries, punishable by law. Discussing national security matters is very sensitive, and yet we've heard that inclusion and participation in these processes is absolutely key, including civil society. What are the trends on the continent in this regard?
Yeah, the trends are, continue to be that many of the African countries continue to regard any discussions around security sector dynamics as an area that is, fenced off. And certainly it breeds ignorance amongst policymakers. So if you go to parliamentary committees on defense and security, they have very little knowledge, on the subject. So I think we need to begin to expand the area of knowledge through emerging universities, international relations subjects, and conflict studies. And I think the African Union and other regional economic groups are beginning to provide space for that debate to take place. But at national level, in some of the countries, it is still, it's still very early days for that discussion to be vibrant. So it's a subject area that is still has to be worked on. Many regimes consider a discussion as if almost you are trying to undermine, their stay in power. So it's associated with almost political opposition, and it is not necessarily with experts. And many of us who have retired from uniform are in academia. There's few and far of us for now, but I think we're making great strides to increase the numbers.
Right. Now, you say you're making great strides. Are there any positive examples that you might be able to share with us?
Certainly, I have taught, two master's courses supported by the African Union at Addis Ababa University, the Institute for Peace and Security Studies. And the audience was really key officials within the African Union itself, surrounding embassies that are now beginning to be interested and almost to be allowed by some governments to begin to engage. So yes, there's a small cadre of people that is beginning to constitute a catalyst towards going forward to discussing the issues.
Right. Now, going forward, what do you see as the larger trends in national security strategy making? I mean, there's been the case of South Africa, the cases of Sierra Leone, where we've seen a greater sense of participation. I mean, do you see this trend continuing? How optimistic are you of the future?
There are actually two pillars. On the one hand, you see a very positive trend, as you have rightly identified, Ivory Coast, Senegal, South Africa, Benin, Botswana. Many of these countries, it's really beginning to be something that is really a subject to be discussed. But I think we must also take into account the reversal in terms of democratic consolidation. Presidents changing the constitutions, redirecting security sector reform for them to stay in power. And there are a number of that. And for the moment, the African Union is in fact battling with trying to intervene in Burundi exactly on this issue. So you have these two pillars. One, I think a very positive development, but on the other, I think we need to acknowledge that there are areas still of very major contestation.
Now, strategically, what needs to happen for us to push that positive trend, to make it more sustainable on the continent?
In my view, whatever is going to happen to continue to push the positive element must not necessarily be seen to be an outside external intrusion. It has to grow from within. We have to begin to grow our own timber, as they say. And so the programs that many of us are involved in, with the African Union, teaching at the major universities, and we are beginning to do the same. University of South Africa, we facilitate a program on elections, conflict, and democratization in Africa. And so it is the tertiary institutions, emerging experts, and Africans themselves who must take the lead, of course, facilitated by resources. But certainly the agenda has to remain grounded on the African continent itself. And I think it's beginning to happen with facilitation and complementarity support, from outsiders.
Well, that's a very positive note to end. We've been joined by Dr. Martin Rupiya, who is a defense specialist working on Southern African security issues associated with the University of South Africa. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining us, and we definitely hope to continue this discussion in the months ahead.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.